but I think we should make a go because it's quite a busy session, and we have a lot to get through. So we should aim to wrap up around 4:45 or so. We'll allow time for Q&A and so on as well. Folks, thank you for joining us this afternoon for what is, I think it's our first webinar for 2024, and we're looking at the top 5 ESG trends for 2024. So in today's session, we'll set the scene a little bit. We'll take a look back at 2023 just to get a good idea of what's driving ESG forward into 2024. We're certainly going to take a look at the trends around the mandatory and regulatory requirements of ESG, which are evolving rapidly across all jurisdictions as well. We're going to take a look at the supply chain engagement and transparency. I think up until now, supply chain has been relatively unaffected by a lot of this. And I think that's set to change now in 2024. I think there's a couple of things driving that, certainly the carbon agenda being one of them. I think we're going to see a big trend in tech and digital solutions, and we'll take a look at that and why that's the case, surely around the vastness of data that is required for ESG reporting. We're going to take a look as well at other parts of ESG that are having a big impact, but just not making the same amount of noise as maybe things like the carbon agenda. And as a result, people are a little bit unaware, but still going to massively impact business, and important to be aware of that. And we're going to see and hear more of that throughout 2024. Certainly biodiversity is a big one at the minute. And then we're going to take a look at the shifting sort of nature of ESG with regards commercialization and how we're starting to see ESG, particularly ESG data being used. Okay, so before I jump into the session, a little bit about me, a little bit about SustainIQ. So I'm one of the co-founders of SustainIQ. My background is sustainability, working with businesses for nearly 20 years. My biggest challenge throughout that time has always been accessing accurate and reliable data for reporting. So SustainIQ was kind of born out of that need to make it easy for organizations to capture their data and report on their performance. And we are all passionate at SustainIQ about helping our customers take a more data-driven approach to ESG, and particularly those big decisions, investment decisions that we all have to make in the coming years, such as things around net zero and so on as well. So we help our customers make better decisions. We help them become more competitive within their marketplace. We save them time and money by providing a digital solution. We help them build trust with stakeholders, with their clients, their employees, their supply chain, investors, public, members of the public even as well. And we help them reduce risk of non-compliance with legislation, with a contract requirement, or indeed an accusation of greenwashing. So a little bit more about SustainIQ later, but I think for today we need to jump straight into the session and start taking a look at 5 key trends, ESG trends for 2024. Okay, so just quickly, let's look back at 2023, just to set the scene a little bit, understand where we've come from, and what are those key drivers looking like for 2024. So I think we can all agree ESG reporting has exploded across all sectors, across all regions and all jurisdictions, and we've all seen that happen, and it's impacted us all in lots of different ways, depending on the sector that we operate in, depending on our clients, and the different jurisdictions and the requirements and so on around that. But it's hard to avoid at this stage. And we've seen a lot of our customers, certainly, but a lot of businesses as a whole spend 2023, I suppose, carrying out a bit of analysis on their own businesses to understand, well, what data do they currently hold? Because a lot of us already hold a lot of what we now call ESG performance data. But more importantly, what do we not? What's missing? Where are the gaps? So that we can get those reporting structures in place. And we can start the flow of data coming through, accurate, reliable data for reporting. And we've seen a lot of that in 2023. So as a result, we're now starting to see businesses in particular start to move a lot faster towards their targets and their goals and so on as well. In 23, we've seen a rapid acceleration in sustainability regulations and different pieces of legislation and so on coming through, heightening the demand for high quality ESG data to meet the different evolving standards, global standards, as well as regulatory requirements as well. So we're going to take a look at some of those later as well. And then we also seen investors now requiring ESG information, certainly a trend that we've seen with our customer base last year, where maybe investors in a parent company, or if they were sitting as part of a portfolio, now been required to report their ESG performance as part of a due diligence exercise. Investors not wanting to be seen to be investing in something damaging the environment or harming the local community somewhere, so carrying out those due diligence exercises to avoid that. And then just some key stats as well down the right hand side to kind of just back up the direction of travel. 31% of EU investors saying ESG is central to their investment approach. 83% of the G250 currently already reporting on sustainability. 96% of financial reporting executives believing ESG will make their businesses better, and 41% of financial reporting executives stating ESG is clearly linked to business strategy. Okay, so that's kind of 2023 and what we've sort of seen. Looking ahead now to 24 and what those key drivers are. So again, we've mentioned the regulatory, legislative stuff coming through and evolving quite rapidly, one of which is CSRD. It's kind of the first one to come out that we're kind of getting a better idea of what the reporting format is going to look like. And so this is obviously applicable to the EU. So CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, mandating over 50,000 EU companies to initiate sustainability reporting, making ESG data a requirement for most businesses at some point, either now or in the future. So larger companies impacted now in 2024, 2025, with the rest set to follow 26 onwards. And when you look at how the EU has approached CSRD reporting and the requirements behind the reporting, including the provision of all data and all data having to be tagged, similar to that of financial reporting, you get an idea of the direction of travel that they're going with this piece of legislation. So a massive impact to businesses, so something you very much need to be aware of. Even if it doesn't impact you today, this year, certainly in next year or beyond, there will most definitely be an impact. Then in the UK, policies such as PPN 0620 or PPN 0621, along with the EU's Green Public Procurement, GPP, now requiring businesses to provide ESG data within the public procurement space. So many of you that would tender for work, for example, would already be familiar with this. You will see the questions around ESG, maybe it's around carbon, maybe it's social value in the UK, for example. We're starting to see more and more ESG related questions coming in. And as a result, the weighting, the scoring increasing as well. So actually making it very commercial in terms of securing those tenders, those jobs. Investors safeguarding against climate risk, demand ESG data from investee firms, leading to a downstream push for ESG requirements throughout the value chain. So again, looking at how investors are driving ESG reporting, again, through their portfolio. Globally, consumers are increasingly mindful of sustainability, and that is driving the trend with regard to purchasing, and that's very much set to continue in 2024 as well. And then businesses also shifting their focus towards scope 3. So I think during 22, 23, businesses very much got on top of their scope 1 and their scope 2 emissions. And now scope 3 is their focus. It's a beast. Obviously, we know that it's going to be, what, 60, 70, 80% of most companies' footprint. So it's a big area, but it's a massive area. There's a lot of challenges. But this shift in focus is going to really bring the spotlight in on the value chain, because we can't do any of this without them. We need the value chain, we need the supply chain on board to help us achieve the targets, to achieve the goals. And so it's time now to shift that focus and make it clear to them what we need in terms of reporting and so on. So big impact there as well. So that's kind of the key drivers we see it for 2024. Okay, so if we just take a look at the first trend in a little bit more detail, again, back to the mandatory regulatory requirements. So it's important to know this. It's heavy going, but it's important that we're all aware of this and we're all familiar with how this could impact us, no matter which country, which EU state we're in. It's going to impact all of us at some point. So with the International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, rolling out finalised IFRS standards, ESG reporting requirements are now starting to drip feed into legislation and accounting standards of markets globally. So it's crucial in 2024 to keep tabs on your jurisdiction's version of emerging requirements. So every country has its own version coming out. And we're going to take a look at some of those in a second. Certainly we spoke about CSRD within the EU, UK's version coming soon as well, as is the USA. So it's just important that you're aware of it and you understand the impact it could have on your business as well. So even if it doesn't impact you immediately, that's a good thing. That means you've got a window of opportunity to do what you need to do, to get the process in place, to get the data flowing, so that whenever it does start to impact, you're prepared. You've got everything you need to report and comply. So IFRS finalised the ISSB standards in June 23. So a lot of this stuff is recent. You know, it's all starting to come through, shaping global sustainability reporting requirements. And the adoption in January 24 will impact worldwide legislation, including CSRD, the UK's SDS, and the SEC sustainability requirements in the US. So just to take a look at those three, because that's what we've got more information on, so we can start to get a better idea of how it might impact us, depending on where we are. So CSRD is out first, and it's already starting to bite, and we are already speaking with lots of businesses about CSRD compliance. Okay, so it's adopted now, January 24, and large organizations will be required to report on their sustainability performance. So they are required to report their non-financial performance, their ESG performance, on a par with their financial performance. And so the CSRD have very much taken a similar approach to ESG reporting as with financial reporting. So you've got your report, you've got your data, the data all has to be tagged and so on as well. So it's important just to be familiar with all of that. So a lot of companies now starting to report in 25 based on 24 performance. And again, a lot more than falling into that reporting requirement 26 onwards based on 25 performance. So over the next few years, it'll really start to bed in and start to impact more and more businesses. The European Sustainability Reporting Standards, the ESRS, were published back, I think it was August or October last year. And that was the first time we seen the ESRS standards, the 12, that give us a much better idea of how businesses, how companies need to report in order to comply with CSRD. So again, only published towards the back end of last year. That was really the first time we could get a good idea of what is actually required, how our business is going to be expected to report and comply with this. So again, it's important to remember that if you're operating in the EU, you need to be aware of CSRD. You need to understand if there's an impact. And also if you're, for example, a UK business, but you have EU operations, you may fall under the requirements. So it's important that you check that out. Okay, so within the UK, we're waiting on more around the Sustainability Disclosure Standards, SDS. So the UK are currently planning the SDS, which will be informed by the ISSB standards and ensure the UK complies with emerging financial regs. To be honest, we're all hoping that SDS will be very similar, if not a carbon copy of CSRD, so that we're all reporting a similar way and we're not overcomplicating it for ourselves, having to report in different ways for different jurisdictions. So we'll find out more in the summer. The UK are currently planning to release the SDS initial documentation in July. So we'll get a lot more information in the summer around what is actually going to be required there. So CSRD is a lot further down the road. Obviously, now legislation and companies now having to comply. Okay, over in the US, so the US SEC are currently drafting federal regs that will place sustainability reporting requirements on companies across the US. So already dealing with state regs, companies will now also face US-wide regulations that will ramp up the speed of ESG across all states. So final ruling on that is expected in April 2024 as well. But I suppose like one thing I always like to point out on that slide is the dates. You know, a lot of this stuff is you know, quite recent in terms of, you know, things being published, and, you know, it's moving so quickly in terms of legislation and the normal sort of trajectory, I suppose, in terms of it coming into law. It's the speed at which this stuff is moving. It's very, very quick. So we don't have years to sit back before we need to worry about it. Like, we need to start really considering this now. So yep, if you operate across the EU, the UK, the US, just again, be familiar with all of that and the impact to your business. Okay, trend number 2, supply chain engagement and transparency. This is a big one, and we do think 2024 is going to be a big year for the value chain. I think they've been reasonably, I suppose, protected from a lot of this up until now, while companies focused in on their own scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. It's not just the emissions piece, though, also governance. The G in ESG is having a big impact across supply chain as well. So it's kind of coming at them from a number of different angles. That said, the emissions is the number one driver. Everyone realizes scope 3 is huge. It's a big part of our footprint. And so if we're going to achieve the goals, the targets, we have to bring the value chain with us. It's critical. You know, a lot of the information, a lot of the data that's needed is going to have to come from them. So there's a huge education piece still to take place. It's going to be on a lot of the larger companies that have got big value chains in place to possibly educate and get everyone up to speed in terms of, you know, why we're doing this, what information is that you need from them. Be really clear in your ask. Like, what is it that you need in terms of the data around emissions? How do you want them to report it? How often in terms of frequency? And making it as easy as possible. Even the language we now use around emissions, like, you know, there's a need for carbon literacy across the value chain so that everyone understands what it is that we're actually talking about and what we're referring to. So huge focus shift now towards supply chain engagement, and as a result, getting a little bit more visibility of those scope 3 emissions across our value chain. So the challenge lies in determining the most effective means of communication to facilitate this collaboration, and that is key for me. That is the number one point. It'll either make or break this. You know, it's how we approach this, and I think, again, back to education being absolutely key. They need to be clear in what you're asking, and at some point, the T's and C's in contract orders, in work packages, will all have to be changed and updated to include language around provision of scope 3 data as part of any contract or any order. And we're already seeing customers doing that. Like that's already starting to happen. So it is actually a contractor requirement to provide this information. So I think, though, we need to give certainly smaller companies time to process and understand what it is that's needed, because a lot of them don't have a process in place to capture it for themselves, never mind capture it for their customers. So I think there's time there that is needed so that they can get a process in place to get the data flow moving, so that they can start to get you the information over in the way that you need it, based around whatever the agreed frequency is. I think it's really important as well, particularly for the smaller companies maybe in the value chain, that maybe think a lot of this stuff isn't going to impact them, because the legislation is it's really targeting maybe the larger companies. That actually, if the legislation doesn't impact you first, commercially, it will, because your customers, and again, even today, if you jump onto their websites, if you look at the language that they are using around net zero, around emissions, they're all talking about this stuff. So commercially, if you want to continue working for your customers, the reality is they're going to come looking that information from you anyway, probably before the legislation requires you to report on it. So commercially, you're going to have to provide it anyway. So it's important that you kind of get on board with that, understand the impact of that, and do what you need to do in-house to get the data over to your customers. Okay. And I think it's important that we do avoid carbon tunnel vision, because I think we're all a little bit guilty of it. There's so much noise around greenhouse gas emissions, around the carbon agenda, and people think that that's the only thing we need to be thinking about, it's the only thing we need to worry about. Well, actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many other things happening in the background that are going to have as much of an impact as the carbon agenda, but just not making as much noise. And as a result, people just aren't fully aware. So again, we're going to see a lot more of those come to the fore during 2024. Biodiversity, for example, being one of those. So while reducing emissions is important, focusing solely on this metric can lead to carbon tunnel vision. So particularly with new regs such as CSRD, the social aspect of ESG, the S of ESG, is becoming more important for businesses to consider and report on. So therefore, the same applies to the supply chain. Consideration must be given to other factors such as social value, biodiversity, ensuring a more comprehensive and socially responsible approach to practices is applied across the supply chain. And so just to focus in a little bit on the social aspect, because again, this tends to be an area when you sit down with businesses, they're quite strong actually in this area. They just don't really capture it and report on it. So the need for social and people data has risen from the growing recognition that businesses play a crucial role in society, with their impact extending beyond environmental considerations. It can be easy to look at the quantitative data and develop assumptions. However, the qualitative data is just as important. So you need to understand the story behind and the impact that it's actually having on an individual's life through business activity. I think one really good example of that would be where businesses provide opportunities, career opportunities for apprenticeships, for placements, for people that maybe have been struggling to find work, whatever. Huge impact, providing a job, a career potentially, and it's life-changing with a massive social impact. So it's important to track that and to be able to report on that. So data that reports on factors such as fair labor practices, human rights, modern slavery, diversity and inclusion, community engagement, all now increasingly important, all forms part of the reporting requirements such as CSRD in terms of the social aspect. And so, you know, all that non-financial reporting performance data that you need to be able to have access to and report on. So a lot of this stuff you do already. It's just about tracking it so that you're able to report on it. Okay, trend number 3, we're going to take a look at tech and digital solutions. And I think, like, number 1, we all have come to the realization that the amount of data required to report on ESG is just vast. And it's getting bigger. Like, you know, when you look at scope 3 emissions, we haven't actually bottomed all of that out yet. So by the time, you know, we get closer to 26, even up to 2030, scope 3 is going to have evolved more and more. So there's going to be even more data required. So it's going to be impossible really for any business to track that, report on that accurately and reliably without some sort of digital solution in place. Okay, so businesses have so many different teams now that need to report on ESG data. So finance needs information for non-financial reporting, and we do see finance taking ownership of ESG. Again, that's another trend. Marketing needs information to support the green claims and avoid accusations of greenwashing. Bid teams, again, if you're in that public procurement space, need access to a lot of this data to secure work to win those tenders. The data often lives in spreadsheets. It's scattered across multiple systems. It's fragmented, and in some cases, it's not even being recorded at all. And that's the big challenge for a lot of businesses with regards to ESG. Much of the data, not all, but much of the data already exists. It's just scattered. It's siloed. It, you know, hasn't been fully sort of joined up. So in 24, every department has a part to play. And I think that's important, that we realize that we've moved away from one person, even one department, being able to do this. It's too big. So it's a decentralized approach. Everyone will have a part to play. And that'll be defined by the tech stack structure to ensure compliance with the regulations and the way forward. So those digital solutions, those tech solutions are going to be key to helping you all capture your data across all your different locations, your different sites, your different jurisdictions, and then being able to report on the many kind of frameworks or standards or legislation, regs, clients, whatever it is, that you need to report to. Because again, it's not just one thing, like it's not just CSRD or SDS. Your clients need the information. The information is going to lots and lots of different places now. So you need it for lots and lots of different reasons. So look, if we take an example, a company with say 30 sites, typical customer maybe of ours, operating across different countries, they don't have any tech, how do you even go about starting capturing this? Spreadsheets just don't cut it. Every jurisdiction has its own standards, and they have their own conversion metrics, particularly around the emissions piece. Every country would have its own set of carbon factors, and guidelines around reporting. So the tech will be a game changer in helping firms centralize the data flows, delegate reporting workloads, and ultimately save huge amounts of time, money, and resource, and ensure accuracy and reliability of the data that's being reported. Furthermore, businesses are facing more compliance-related requirements to prepare their non-financial reporting and ESG reporting to an audit standard. And CSRD is driving that. That's the exact sort of direction of travel for CSRD reporting. SDS would be the same. It's very much being reported to an audit standard. Okay, so the next trend that we're going to look at is biodiversity. Number 4, biodiversity will be in the boardroom in 2024. And it's not something that a lot of you will hear about, or certainly heard about a lot. And a lot of you might be working in sectors that actually you don't think this will even apply to us. We're maybe a services sector. We're maybe in a city centre office building or something like that. You might just not necessarily link biodiversity through to you and your business, and what you're doing. And I suppose, get that idea out of your head straight away, because it's coming in and it's going to impact every single one of us as well. So it's important to be aware of that. So in terms of what's happening with biodiversity in the natural environment, regulatory initiatives such as the proposed Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, TNFD, reflect a global push to address biodiversity within ESG reporting. So investors, again, are increasingly factoring biodiversity into their investment strategies, acknowledging the risks associated with biodiversity loss, and recognizing the significance of sustainable business practices. As a result, biodiversity metrics and reporting mechanisms have all been developed in recent years, and in 2024, more regulations will be developed around biodiversity and the reporting. So just to take a look at 2, so if we take a closer look at TNFD, TNFD is a global initiative that seeks to integrate nature-related risks and opportunities into financial decision-making. It focuses on developing a framework to guide companies in disclosing and managing their impacts on nature. The framework was issued formally for market adoption again in September 2023, just another recent date. While adoption of the framework is voluntary, it is very possible that it could become mandated. So it's one to watch, because it could impact. And we're seeing it impact in certain sectors. So for example, construction and the property sector. So if we take a look now at biodiversity net gain, BNG, already having an impact at planning stages. Lots of our customers already having to report on this. So BNG, biodiversity net gain, is an approach to development land and marine management that leaves biodiversity in a measurably better state than before the development took place. So to be legally mandated on all new planning permissions at the end of January 2024. So now, meaning developers must deliver at least 10% biodiversity net gain on all new developments. And again, this is just in England. It's not even across the whole of the UK yet. It's very much just in England, but like most things, it will make its way across all other jurisdictions in the UK, and we're already hearing and seeing certain member states step up with a similar approach as well. So it's very much coming. It's going to impact all of us. So any of you, particularly in that construction or in that property management sort of sector, just be aware of this. Okay, so the task force has published their guidance on integrated approach for the identification and assessment of nature-related issues and this is called LEAP, and it's really, really useful actually. LEAP stands for Locate, Evaluate, Assess, and Prepare. The framework outlines an approach for businesses to identify and assess their nature-related initiatives. So while aligned with TNFD recommendations, it is useful for all businesses looking to report on this area, regardless of their formal disclosure requirements. So we'll not go into LEAP, but we'll just take a quick look at it. LEAP stands for Locate, Evaluate, Assess, and Prepare. And again, it's just really useful to be aware of it and to go through it and to understand how it could be applied within your business to help you identify those risks, those opportunities, and ultimately how you could start to report on this. And they've actually produced a sector by sector guide. Again, it's available on the website. So you can go through, and even some of those sectors that you maybe think don't necessarily have a big impact on biodiversity or indeed the natural environment. Again, if you take a look online and go and look for your sector, and there should be a guide there to give you a little bit more information in terms of the impact and how you should be identifying and reporting on that. Okay, so the fifth and final trend for 2024 is the commercialization of ESG data across sectors. And again, we started to see this happen last year, but it's really picked up pace, and we expect now 2024 we're going to see a lot more of it. I suppose, look, we always kind of take the approach that sustainability has been around for a long, long time. So is ESG. It was, born in the financial world a couple of decades ago, but sustainability has always been very much like will always continue to be like a cultural thing. It's very much your business, your DNA, who you are. While ESG has kind of always been the commercial wing of that. It's kind of like the reporting piece, the data, the performance aspect of your sustainability strategy, I suppose. And so I think we're going to just see that kind of bedding in a little bit more across businesses as well. So again, traditionally, sustainability as a whole, very much viewed as a nice to have, particularly the last 10 or 15 years, in terms of how I suppose organizations and businesses use sustainability even publicly on their websites, across their socials, to kind of position themselves and sort of, show the impact that they were having and all of the good work that they were doing. But when you scratched the surface, there wasn't a lot to back up the messaging. And I'm sure it was there, but data just really wasn't part of the process back then. And that's completely changed. So we now see data as being the critical part of all of this as we kind of move forward, particularly now in 2024. ESG will now become more commercialized, and companies that have been considering ESG from an early stage will now excel and outcompete within the marketplace, particularly where ESG data is being demanded or required. So I think, look, we are already seeing this where businesses are using their ESG data, their sustainability performance, to position themselves as leaders in their marketplace. And those that got on board early have had time to do that, time to get visibility of their data, make sense of it, and use it to drive the business forward, drive business improvement. And so then what they're now seeing because of that their clients are actually very hungry for those in the value chain that are able to step forward as leaders and help them start to achieve their goals. So there is a real market for that at the minute, and anyone that is able to step forward and take a lead. Certainly a lot of the clients we're seeing are very, very keen to speak with, to partner with, and to work with those companies, all aspects of ESG, but in particular the carbon agenda. So there are certainly opportunities there from a commercial perspective, and we're seeing more and more of that. So private sector investors are driving the demand for ESG data. So just taking a look at maybe the likes of data centers or pharma businesses, the pharma industry are putting massive ESG pressures, typically at company level, but then, it's kind of filtering through the whole value chain. So working with those clients, companies can begin to leverage your ESG credentials, and highly performing companies can use that data to either win investment or secure finance to scale businesses to grow, or indeed win those tenders, win those bids, and start working for those big companies and customers that are very much on the lookout for those companies that are taking ESG seriously and putting all the right processes in place to access the data and be able to report. And again, we're seeing that on a daily basis. Companies kind of recognize that and are doing what they need to do to try to get out and stay out in front. So using the data as leverage, companies will actually begin to commercialize their data in 2024. And yeah, we expect that's very much a trend that will continue way beyond 2024. Some sectors are leading than others. I think those that have maybe worked in the public procurement space have got a little bit used to this more so than others, and they are been able to move a little bit faster. But really, ESG as a whole, it's not sector specific. It's impacting all of us in all countries and all sectors and all of our businesses in some way or other. So as a result, there's opportunities there for all of us as well within the commercial space. Okay, so in terms of using the ESG data to help win work, so for example, in the UK with PPN 06, PPN 0620, PPN 0621, there is a focus on social value and carbon reduction. So for example, in the UK, if you're tendering for work, you will have to have, and it's related to like Crown Commercial Services, you will have to have a carbon reduction plan. It will have to be published on your website or somewhere where it can be accessed. And that's very much part of the tender process. So if you're in that space and you don't yet have a carbon reduction plan and you haven't published it, then you need to do that urgently. It's very much part of that whole process, and it's important that you have that. So that's already in place. Social value, again, we're seeing on tenders up to around 20% weighting in a quality submission. So commercially, it's an opportunity to secure extra points and secure the win and therefore win the work as well. Okay, in the EU, we've got Green Public Procurement, GPP, and this is placing requirements on government departments to consider and include environmental impacts within the procurement decision-making process. So again, we're starting to see that in particular coming through the tender process, where companies are tendering for public sector work, and we're seeing more and more ESG-related questions coming through. So we had a customer recently, 3 of the questions were carbon related, and they were worth 17.5% weighting in the quality submission. So it gives you an idea of, I suppose, the commercial value of being able to step up and answer a question like that and provide the evidence and secure that kind of 17.5% weighting. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, that's what could potentially win you the job. So again, we're seeing that across the board. GPP is very much driving that right across all member states. So from a business perspective, companies that are ahead of the curve can exploit their strong ESG credentials to exploit these policies and derive commercial gain and value. So we're very much highlighting this to all of you today. A lot of you will already be aware of it and very much doing it. Some of you, maybe this is all quite new to, so it's just to be aware. And within public sector, this is just the beginning. There have been calls and continue to be calls for weighting related to sustainability questions, social value and ESG type questions to be increased again in the future. So it is just the beginning. It is very much going to grow in terms of the weighting and the value that it adds within the public procurement space. And then, you know, private sector as well is very much kind of aligned with this as well. So it's both sectors really. Okay, folks. So that really covers the 5 trends. I do hope they were useful. I hope it was useful. I hope it gave you a bit of an insight into what 2024 looks like with regards ESG. It is moving at a rapid pace. I suppose just to wrap up, we did highlight trend 3, I think, was around the need for a tech solution, a digital solution. That is, of course, what SustainIQ is all about. So just very quickly to give you a bit of an overview of what we are, what we do. SustainIQ is the all-in-one ESG reporting software solution. Pretty much we cover all aspects of ESG, and we make it easy for customers to capture their data across their different sites. It might be across different countries, different jurisdictions, different sectors, and so on. So we make it easy to capture all of that, and we built our own methodology. And across that methodology, we've actually now got over 200 different data capture points that our customers can use to easily track their ESG performance. So just to take a quick look at our methodology, we built SustainIQ across those 4 pillars that you see on screen. And those 200 data capture points are across each of the 4 pillars. Just to give you a quick run through different types of data capture. Under procurement, it's all things to do with products, materials, supply chain. So a lot of governance is looked after in there, a lot of scope 3 emissions. We use a lot of automated forms to automate the process. We've got embodied carbon calculators to calculate embodied carbon of products and materials, all covered within procurement. Environmental covers the main environmental indicators such as waste management, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, water usage, conservation. People, health and diversity focuses on social value, but with a focus on internal investment in people. So we're looking at health and well-being, safety, diversity, inclusivity, training and development, apprenticeship and placement opportunities, and so on. And then the final pillar is community engagement and partnering. Again, social value, but this time externally focused, tracking your partnerships with community organizations, volunteering, charitable donations, or any engagements with schools, colleges, universities. So our customers use SustainIQ to track their performance across those 4 pillars, all into one big central dashboard where there's lots of filters to drill down, interrogate data, understand performance. And then within that, we've got a reporting library where you can generate your own reports for whatever stakeholder you need to produce a report for, and get it issued out quickly. So we've made it easy. We've set it out, and it definitely makes things a lot easier for companies to approach the ESG reporting piece. So look, we're working across many sectors now. SustainIQ has been used in over 30 countries, and again, working with lots of different companies across lots of different sectors as well. So look, if it's something that you think you'd be interested in finding out a little bit more about, please get in touch. Go to SustainIQ.com. Or send us an email at hello@sustainiq.com, and one of the team will definitely get back to you and set up a session just to explore a little bit further. Regarding today's webinar, I'll just have a quick look through the chat here to see if there's any questions coming in. Yes, you'll receive a copy of the webinar and the slides. Our marketing team will be sending that all out, I believe, tomorrow. And the ebook, I believe on the email that goes out tomorrow, you'll see like a little logo on the email signature. If you click on that, there'll be a form, fill that out, and you can then download the ebook as well. Yeah, I think there you go. Actually, the ebook it's been dropped in there to the chat. Brilliant. That's great. I just any other questions, folks, before we wrap up? Happy enough. Brilliant. And again, guys, any questions or queries after today's session, please email them through hello@sustainiq.com. We're more happy to get back to you and give you any help or assistance that you guys need. So again, thank you very much, all of you, for taking time out and joining us this afternoon. I hope you found it useful, and we'll speak soon. Okay, take care. Cheers. Bye.